Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload, and The invitation said business formal, but everyone showed up dressed like it was a coronation. The hotel ballroom was dipped in gold light and thin music, the kind of soft jazz that sounds like people pretending not to gossip. A banner read "Congratulations" in a tasteful font, and a crystal sculpture with the company logo sat on a pedestal, cold and proud. I adjusted my tie and kept my hands in my pockets so no one would notice the tremor that had started that afternoon when my wife texted, "Wear something sharp tonight, we're celebrating greatness." She worked in operations at a logistics firm that grew by merging with anyone who would stand still long enough to sign. Her boss, the man of the hour, had the kind of smile that looks practiced in a mirror. He shook hands like a seasoned politician and squeezed shoulders like a pastor. I'd met him twice. He remembered my name the way people remember a brand, not a person. We found our assigned table. My wife placed her clutch on the linen like it needed its own seat. She looked incredible in a navy dress and a necklace I'd bought last winter. The one she'd said made her feel like a CEO and a movie star at the same time. I thought of the late nights, the strategy decks, the way she'd come home smelling like hotel air, that sterile mix of citrus and carpet glue. She'd said a promotion was coming for her too soon. "They finally see me," she'd whispered last week, eyes bright. "They finally see what I do." The room hummed with compliments. Servers floated through with trays of champagne. Someone behind me said, "He saved the quarter." Someone else said, "The board loves him." On stage, the regional VP told a story about the boss taking a call at 3 a.m. to solve a shipping crisis during a blizzard. People laughed at the punchline, the kind you craft for sincerity. I smiled because everyone else smiled. I was good at that. At our table, the team arranged themselves around the social center of gravity, him. He sat with the ease of a man who believes the floor exists because he steps on it. When he looked our way, my wife straightened. I watched her posture change the way you watch a tide move, slow and inevitable. She became brighter, sharper, like a spotlight had found her. During the second course, he approached with a glass raised. "To the engine in this room," he said, voice warm enough to melt butter. "To the people who transform pressure into performance." My wife laughed like a bell. "To leadership," she said, and everyone followed with a chorus of "Hear, hear." The VP clinked glasses with a crisp little tap that sounded like money. I drank, and the champagne tasted metallic, like a penny under the tongue. Then dessert arrived, and the microphone found its way to our table as if fate had scribbled the route on a place card. The VP said, "We want to hear from the team that made this happen." Laughter, encouragement, those small gestures crowds use to push someone onto a stage they're already walking toward. My wife stood, cheeks flushed, eyes shining. She didn't look at me. I knew the look she wore. I'd seen it when she nailed a big vendor negotiation, when a slide deck landed clean, when she found a way through a bind no one else could untangle. It was pride, but wider, like pride trying on a gown 2 sizes too grand. She lifted her glass and turned toward her boss, who was waiting with that patient, excellent smile. "Congrats to my boss," she said, voice steady. "The real man who deserves me." The air changed. It wasn't the words alone. It was the way she served them, like silk on a knife. For a half second, people tried to decide if they'd heard a joke. Laughter bubbled and died in the same breath. Someone coughed. The VP's smile froze in a way you only notice when you're looking for cracks. My wife didn't notice any of it. She kept speaking as if the line had landed exactly the way she planned. "To a leader who makes everyone around him better. To the person who inspires me every day." Glasses wavered. Clinks happened like accidents. My wife sat down with a small, satisfied nod, like a performer sticking the landing. She turned toward me as if to bask in my approval. I met her eyes and smiled, because sometimes smiling is how you stay standing on the deck of a ship that just hit ice. The music resumed. People talked louder to drown what they just heard. A teammate leaned across the table to ask me about the dessert, his voice too bright. The boss rested a hand on my wife's chair, casual, possessive in the manner of men who have never been told no. He thanked her for the toast with a tone that could mean anything. I excused myself, found the hallway near the restrooms, and watched my face in the mirror. It didn't look broken. It looked like a man deciding whether he still belonged to his own life. A stranger washing his hands said, "Some toast," and gave me a sympathetic half-smile. I felt a demon rise in my chest and sit down quietly, taking notes. Back at the table, my wife had regained her sparkle, telling a story about an overseas shipment reroute that saved a contract. People leaned in, grateful for normal conversation. I looked at her hands while she spoke, the precise gestures, the little circles she drew in the air when she explained a process. Those hands used to draw plans with me for our future. Apartments we would consider one day, a patio garden we might plant. I could still see her on a Sunday afternoon, hair in a bun, eating cherries over a spreadsheet, telling me about margins and constraints like they were poetry. I held those memories the way you hold something that's still hot. The night ended with a photo by the crystal sculpture. My wife stood on one side of her boss and held her glass up toward the camera. I stood on the other side, slightly behind, like a friendly footnote. The flash popped. The image would go to the company's internal newsletter with a caption about teamwork. If you zoomed in, you could see the exact moment a man learned something important and decided not to bleed in public. In the car, she chatted about who said what and who hinted at a reorg. She said, "You were quiet," like an accusation wrapped in concern. "Long day," I said. "Congratulations to your boss." The words tasted like wood smoke. She didn't apologize for the line she'd delivered. She didn't even mention it. People who believe they are the weather don't apologize for the rain. At home, she set the clutch on the counter and kicked off her heels. The necklace winked under the kitchen light. "We should go away next month," she said, filling a glass at the sink. "He's talking about a leadership offsite in Napa. I might be invited." "We?" I asked, and kept my tone soft. She blinked like I'd interrupted a dream. "I mean me," she said, and sipped. "You know how these things go." I nodded. I did know. I knew about expense codes and silent car rides and the particular intimacy of delayed flights. I knew my wife had started carrying a second charger and a second smile for a world that didn't include me. I also knew how to measure twice and cut once. I was not going to throw a plate. I was going to build something that didn't wobble when you sat on it. The next morning I woke early, brewed coffee, and opened a blank notebook. I titled the page after the banner from last night, "The Promotion Dinner." Underneath, I drew a thin horizontal line, the kind carpenters draw across planks to mark where the saw will go. Above the line, I listed everything I could control. Below it, everything I couldn't. I could not control her choices. I could not control how they looked at each other across conference tables and rented stages. I could control what happened to the life we'd built if she chose to leave me the way a person leaves a car at the curb with the engine running. I made a second list: fax, joint checking, 2 credit cards, one in my name with her as an authorized user, one in hers with me added later. During a week we thought teamwork meant entwined finances, a shared savings account, my separate retirement, her separate stock options, an emergency fund we'd pledged never to touch except for emergencies. I underlined the word and sat back. If betrayal isn't an emergency, what is it? But I didn't want to argue semantics with a judge. I wanted to be clean. I called the bank and asked about safeguards. I asked about dual authorizations. I asked how to remove an authorized user without triggering a letter before the new cards arrived. I asked about withdrawal alerts and spending caps and the timing of nightly batch updates. I took notes like a diligent student. The representative on the phone praised my prudence. I thanked her and circled the phrases that mattered: 24-hour hold, daily limit, branch verification required. These weren't weapons. They were seatbelts. I met a friend for lunch, someone who loved me enough to be both blunt and kind. He said, "You can burn it all down or you can build a new door. Pick." I chose the door. In the evenings I cooked dinner and set an extra plate even when she texted she'd be late. I put leftovers away and watered the basil plant she kept meaning to repot. I watched her when she came in, how she checked her phone before she took off her shoes, how she smiled at the screen like the screen was the part of her day that made sense. I didn't ask, "Who is he?" I already knew how stories like this arc. You can feel a shape in a room without seeing the object. At night, I read, not revenge forms, not rants, policy manuals, HR ethics, the company's code of conduct, which they'd posted proudly on their site, language about relationships, disclosures, conflicts of interest. There were lines worth highlighting. There were lines worth keeping in a safe place. I did not print anything. I wrote down page numbers and exact phrases in my neat block letters, the way I letter labels for drawers in my shop. One Saturday, while she showered, I stood at the dresser and looked at our wedding photo. We were on the courthouse steps, laughing at something the photographer had said about how good we looked for people who'd eaten vending machine pretzels for lunch. I lifted the frame and discovered it was heavier than it looked. The backing wasn't secured. Someone had slid it slightly askew. That someone was probably me, dusting, careless on a Tuesday. Still, the detail stuck. Slipped and nearly unnoticed. A lot can hide behind a picture that looks perfect. Sunday afternoon, she mentioned her boss would be in Houston for the week. Her voice was careful, like a waitress balancing bowls of soup. She said they were rolling out a new distribution model. She would hold the fort. I nodded, said to be safe, and kissed her cheek. Her skin was cool. She smelled like a brand that promised clarity. I spent that week doing the quiet work that decides the ending. I moved my direct deposit to a personal account. I set up alerts so that if any transfer over a modest amount happened from our savings, I would receive a message on my phone, and at my email, and at a backup email I never use except for tax season. I spoke to the bank manager in person so I could look into human eyes when I asked, if someone tries to move more than 50% of this account at once, can we require in-branch verification? She checked policies and said yes if both parties pre-authorized that safeguard. I told her we did. I texted my wife. Bank asked us to confirm identity settings for security. Can you approve the email? She replied with a thumbs up and a thank you for handling the boring stuff. My stomach hurt. I clicked confirm. The system would now flag any attempt to drain that account to a new external destination. It would not stop a slow leak, but it would stop a flood. I met with a lawyer for an hour. He wore kind glasses and a tie with small anchors. He said, I can't tell you how to live, only how to protect yourself while you do it. We discussed separation. We discussed documentation. He said, don't poke the bear. Keep records. Don't threaten. Don't post. Don't gossip. Be kind until you must be firm. I wrote that down verbatim. Meanwhile, my wife became more careful and more careless at the same time. Careful with her phone, flipping its screen down. Careless with her words, tossing little sparks that didn't know they were sparks. She said, we're going to crush Q3, when she meant, he told me I'm special. She said, I'm not sure this marriage is pushing me to be my best self. To the dark room after midnight, pretending she was talking to the ceiling, and not to the man who had vowed to push beside her, until both our shoulders ached. If there had been a clean confession, perhaps there would have been a clean end. Instead, there were 1,000 tiny lies dressed like decisions, walking around our apartment in expensive shoes. 2 weeks after the promotion dinner, I stopped at the office where she worked to drop off a lunch she'd forgotten. The receptionist smiled at me the way people smile at a friendly ghost. I left the bag with a note, thought you might need fuel, and saw through glass my wife at a table with her boss. They were reviewing a presentation, their heads bent close, the way people bend toward each other when they're reading the same sentence in different languages. He touched the edge of her laptop as if to steady it. Her face tilted in a private weather system, sunlight no one else could feel. I stood there long enough to know I didn't need to stand any longer. That night she came home late and energized. She said, everything's changing, the same way our neighbors had said it when they were expecting a baby. I asked, do you want to change together? She looked at me as if I'd asked if she wanted to move to the moon. I'm evolving, she said gently. You may not come with me. I washed the dishes and watched the soap slide off the plates like it had done its job and wanted out. I slept on my side of the bed and listened to her breathe like a person practicing freedom. In the morning, I made oatmeal and deleted photos from my phone slowly, choosing which memories to keep in the active folder. I kept the courthouse steps. I kept the basil plant when it was a sprout. I kept the first apartment with the broken radiator. I removed the trip to the mountain cabin where I had felt, for the first time, slightly alone while sitting next to her. On a Thursday, I received an alert at 10:21 p.m. transfer request. $18,700 from joint savings to new external account ending in 4412. I stared at the screen. The system held it for review, just like the manager promised. I checked the transaction details. The destination bank belonged to a branch near a boutique hotel. The description field read moving expenses. The alert included a note. Requires in-branch verification by both account holders. I sat very still. In another room, My wife laughed at something on her phone and then fell quiet. A minute later, she came into the kitchen and reached for a glass. She avoided my eyes. "Long day," she said. "I might go home to see my mother this weekend. She's been asking." "Take the car," I said softly. "It's good for the engine." She nodded, grateful that I still spoke her language. I didn't confront her. I printed the alert and slid it into my notebook. I wrote the time and the exact phrasing of the description. Moving expenses. The words themselves were a confession without the mess of an argument. The next day she left for a team breakfast that probably involved neither a team nor breakfast. I went to the bank with my notebook and my driver's license. The manager confirmed the hold, noted the attempted transfer, and logged my preference regarding any future attempt. Her voice was calm, like a nurse's. "If a second request comes, you'll be notified," she said. "If someone appears in person to move the funds, we'll call. You too." I thanked her and bought a coffee across the street. It tasted like waking up. That weekend, my wife didn't go to her mother's. She went shopping. She came home with a suitcase. She said she'd found a great deal. She left it open on the bedroom floor, tossing in items with a grace that told me this wasn't her first rehearsal. I watched from the doorway the way a man watches a storm form on the horizon, with awe at how swiftly chaos organizes itself, and with the knowledge that his roof has been checked and his windows sealed. On Monday, the company posted the photo from the promotion dinner. Under it, a caption about leadership and gratitude. I clicked away and returned to my work, measuring, marking, cutting. The shop smelled like oak and glue and the steady heat of a plan coming together. At noon, my phone buzzed. New transfer request, $23,000, external account ending in 4412. Description, starting fresh. I read it twice. I stood still and heard my heart count. I didn't rush to the bank. I waited 5 minutes, then 10, then 20, to teach myself the difference between impulse and decision. Then I walked there and signed what needed signing. The hold stayed. The system would require both of us at the counter, identification in hand, signatures captured. The manager looked at me like people look at someone doing a brave, ordinary thing. "I'm sorry," she said. "Me too," I said, and meant it. That evening, the suitcase stood by the door, zipped. My wife's phone flashed with messages whose names I didn't read. She set 2 cards on the table, the joint debit, the credit with my name on it, and said she needed to grab a few things in the morning before heading out to clear her head, which is what people say when the head they want to clear is someone else's shoulder. I didn't argue. I cleared the dinner plates, I watered the basil, I set my alarm for early, and when I lay down I listened to the apartment breathe. This place we had made steady with rent and jokes and routines. I whispered goodnight to the version of us that had done its best until it didn't. At dawn, I brewed coffee and wrote a note on the first page of my notebook, under the line I'd drawn weeks ago. It said, with neat certainty, "Today the story turns." Then I looked at the cards on the table, the suitcase by the door, and the woman I had loved, who slept like a person sure the world would catch her. I didn't wake her. I didn't rehearse speeches or pack a dramatic bag. I just checked my phone one last time. The bank alert chimed again at 8:03 a.m., as if cued by a director. Attempted withdrawal at branch. Status, blocked, dual verification required. I closed my eyes. The scene had started. All I had to do now was stay quiet, stay kind, and let the truth do what it does when you stop trying to wrestle it. The day stretched in front of me like a hallway I had built myself, straight and true. At the far end of it, somewhere I couldn't yet see, someone would swipe a card, and another, and each would answer with the sound of a door that does not belong to them, refusing to open. When she rolled her suitcase out that morning, she kissed me lightly on the cheek like a neighbor borrowing sugar. I let her go without a word. By noon, my phone buzzed with the first alert. Attempted withdrawal at the downtown branch. Status, blocked, dual verification required. I pictured her standing at the counter, rehearsed smile ready, only for the teller to shake their head politely. She didn't come home that night. Instead, I found her closet half empty and her favorite perfume gone from the dresser. The next day, another alert arrived. This time, she tried a transfer online. Again, it froze. She didn't know every card was tethered to safeguards I'd set weeks before. I kept working in my shop, planning oak boards, the rhythm steadying me. Friends asked if I was okay. I told them I was busy. Truth was, I was waiting for the storm to finish. Building. The real moment came at a family dinner 2 weeks later. She showed up late, hairstyled, dressed too new. She sat beside me as if nothing had changed, smiling at my parents, nodding at my sister's stories. When dessert was served, she excused herself to pay the bill, reaching into her purse with practiced ease. And that was the stage I'd built. The waiter returned quietly, bent low and said, "Ma'am, your card has been declined. Would you like to try another?" She froze, reached for the second card, declined again, a third. Same result. Her face drained of its proud color. The room turned silent in the way a crowd does when the truth walks in, uninvited. My father cleared his throat. My sister glanced at me. I only sipped my water, calm, steady, watching her crumble without raising my voice. She excused herself, mumbling something about calling the bank, but everyone already knew. The woman who once raised a glass to another man as the real one who deserved her, now sat powerless, her empire of whispers collapsing under the weight of paper and proof. That was the revenge, not shouting, not chaos, but the cold quiet of every door refusing to open when she reached for it. And I, finally, didn't have to say a word. She never recovered from that night at the restaurant. What should have been her flawless escape unraveled in front of everyone. Family, colleagues, even her boss who had come to drop by and witness the humiliation. 3 cards, 3 declines, each one cutting deeper than any argument ever could. She tried to laugh it off, calling it a bank glitch, but the silence around the table told her no one believed it. The whispers followed. At work, questions about her finances spread faster than any quarterly update. Her boss, the man she once toasted as the real one who deserved her, quietly distanced himself. He wasn't about to tie his polished reputation to someone unraveling in public. Within weeks, her promotion track vanished. Projects she led were reassigned. Meetings went on without her. She was still in the building, but her name stopped appearing on the slides. At home, she found her accounts empty, her credit lines frozen, her options shrinking. Every attempt to lean on me met with calm silence. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I simply lived my life, steady, unshaken, while she drowned in the consequences of her own choices. One night, she appeared at my workshop door, eyes hollow, voice breaking. "I made a mistake," she whispered. I kept sanding the oak board in front of me, the shavings falling like snow. I didn't answer. She wasn't really speaking to me. She was bargaining with the echo of the life she'd thrown away. In the end, she packed the same suitcase she once tried to fill with stolen dreams and left quietly. No grand speech, no apology that could stitch the tear she'd made. Just silence and a slammed door. And me? I didn't chase. I didn't need to. Revenge had never been about breaking her. It was about freeing myself. And as I stood in the workshop, hands steady on the grain, I realized I hadn't lost anything. I had simply cut away the rotten part of the wood to reveal something stronger beneath.